My dad raised his glass and looked right at my brother and said, "I don't know what we would have done without you. You stepped up when it mattered most." Everyone at the table clapped. My aunt wiped her eyes. My mom squeezed my brother's arm like he'd just won a medal. I sat there with a fork in my hand and a smile frozen on my face, and I thought, okay, we're really doing this. I want to back up, because if I just tell you what happened at that dinner table, you won't feel the weight of it the way I did. You need to understand the 3 years that led up to that moment. 3 years of me quietly doing something I never told anyone about, because I thought that's what family does. You handle it. You don't make it a thing. You just help. I'm 31. I work in corporate auditing. I review financial records for a living. I catch discrepancies. I find where the numbers don't line up. It's not glamorous work, but I'm good at it. And more importantly, I understand money in a way that a lot of people in my family don't. That matters later. My parents bought their house in 2008, right before everything fell apart. They got a 30-year fixed mortgage, which at the time seemed manageable. My dad drove a delivery truck for a logistics company. My mom worked part-time at a dental office. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable. Then my dad's company downsized in 2019. He got laid off at 57, and suddenly the mortgage payment felt like a boulder on their chest. I was living in Cincinnati at the time. I'd moved there for a job 3 years earlier, doing audit work for a regional firm. My brother, he's 5 years older than me, lives about 20 minutes from my parents' house in Columbus. He'd always been the one everyone leaned on, or at least that was the story we told ourselves. He was the firstborn, the one who stayed close, the one who showed up for the holidays and helped Dad fix the gutters. My parents adored him, still do, honestly. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't lived it. When my dad lost his job, my parents didn't want to ask either of us for help. That's not how they were raised. My mom called me on a Tuesday night in February and tried to make it sound casual, but I could hear it in her voice. That tight, careful quality people have when they're trying not to panic. She mentioned the mortgage payment was going to be difficult for a few months. That was all she said. A few months. I didn't wait for her to ask. I looked at my budget, figured out what I could genuinely spare without destroying myself, and I offered to help cover the mortgage until my dad got back on his feet. $1,500 a month. My parents' mortgage was around $1,800, so that was most of it. My mom said she couldn't accept that. I said she didn't have a choice. We went back and forth, and eventually she agreed, under the condition that it was a loan and they'd pay me back someday. I told her, fine, whatever makes you feel better, and I meant it. I never expected to see that money again. I was just trying to keep them in their house. Here's the thing that made sense at the time, and feels deeply stupid in retrospect. We did it through my brother. It was my mom's idea. She said it would be easier, less awkward, if the money came through him rather than directly from me. My parents had a joint account with my brother that they used for household expenses. My brother had been added years earlier to help pay bills when my mom had a knee surgery and couldn't drive to the bank. My mom suggested I transfer the money to that account each month and my brother would apply it to the mortgage. That way, she said, it didn't feel like charity. It felt like the family handling things together. I was 28 years old and I trusted my brother completely. I didn't think twice. I set up a recurring transfer of $1,500 on the first of every month. $1,500 like clockwork for 36 months. I didn't track it obsessively. I had my own expenses, my own life. I'd log in occasionally and confirm the transfer had gone through, and that was that. My brother would text me every few months, "Hey, things are getting better, Dad's picking up some part-time work," and I'd feel relieved and move on. The mortgage was never something we discussed openly at family gatherings. My parents knew I was contributing. My brother obviously knew. But it wasn't a topic at the dinner table. I didn't want it to be. I wasn't looking for credit. I was looking for my parents to keep their house. My dad found part-time consulting work about a year in, which helped, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. He picked up some weekend shifts at a hardware store. My mom increased her hours at the dental office. They were doing everything right, trying to dig out. I kept sending the money because I knew they weren't fully there yet and because no one told me to stop. Here's where I should have been paying closer attention. Around month 20, I got a piece of mail at my parents' address. They still had my old address on file for some things that was forwarded to me. It was a notice from the mortgage servicer. I glanced at it, saw the words "important information about your account," and assumed it was one of those routine letters banks send. Refinancing offers, rate change disclosures, that kind of thing. I set it aside and forgot about it. I know what you're thinking. I audit financial records professionally. I should have opened it. But here's the thing about being close to a situation. It makes you complacent in a way you never would be with a client. I wasn't reviewing my parents' finances like a case file. I was their daughter. I trusted that things were fine because nobody had told me they weren't. The second notice arrived 3 months later. This one said, "Notice of default," in bold letters across the top. I sat in my car in a parking lot and read it twice. My parents were 4 months behind on their mortgage. The supervisor was initiating foreclosure proceedings. I couldn't breathe. I called my mom immediately and she was crying before I even finished asking what was happening. She said she didn't know how it had gotten so bad so fast. She said my brother had told her the mortgage was being handled. She said she'd been assuming it was fine. I asked her when she had last actually seen a mortgage statement. She said she didn't know. Maybe a year? She said my brother had offered to handle all the paperwork to take the stress off her, and she'd let him. I'm gonna be honest with you, in that moment, I still didn't fully understand what had happened. My brain was trying to protect me from the most obvious conclusion. I told my mom I'd figure it out. I called my brother. He didn't answer. He texted back an hour later. "Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. It's complicated. Call me tonight." He didn't pick up that night either. I went back to my records. I pulled up every transfer I'd made over the previous 3 years. 36 transfers, $1,500 each, a total of $54,000 that had gone directly from my account into that joint account. And then I did something I should have done at the very beginning. I requested full transaction records on the joint account. It took a few days to get them. When I finally sat down and went through them, I had to go back and read the numbers again because I thought I'd made a mistake. My 1,500 transfers were all there. 36 of them, every single one accounted for, but the money going out toward the mortgage, inconsistent. Some months it was $600, some months it was $600, some months it was $400. A few months there was nothing at all going to the mortgage. Meanwhile, there were regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, ranging from $800 to $1,200 a month. I traced the account number. It was in my brother's name. A personal savings account, nothing to do with household expenses. I did the math. Of the $54,000 I had sent, approximately $11,000 had actually gone toward my parents' mortgage. The rest, over $43,000, had been quietly redirected. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I went back and recalculated. His wife worked, she was in medical billing. They weren't struggling. There was no emergency, no crisis I didn't know about. He had taken money I was sending to keep our parents in their house, and he had used it for something else entirely for 3 years, without saying a word. I called a family law attorney and an accountant I trusted. I documented everything. I didn't confront my brother yet. I needed to understand what I was dealing with first. The attorney told me that because the transfers went through a joint account my brother had legitimate access to, the civil recovery picture was complicated. Not impossible, but it would require establishing the intent and the specific allocation of funds. The accountant helped me build a paper trail. We prepared a detailed accounting document showing every transfer, every outgoing payment, and the gap between what had been sent and what had reached the mortgage. I also quietly paid the mortgage arrears myself. Another $7,200 to bring it current and stop the foreclosure. I didn't tell my parents where the money came from immediately. I just needed the clock to stop. In total, by the time I had calculated everything, I had sent $54,000 over 3 years plus $7,200 to clear the default dollars, $61,200. Christmas was in 6 weeks. My family does Christmas at my parents' house every year. My dad's 2 brothers come, my mom's sister, a few cousins. It's always the same. My mom makes her baked ziti. My dad burns the garlic bread. My aunt brings a cake that nobody asked for. And we sit around the table and pretend everything is fine in the way that families do. I decided I wasn't going to bring it up before Christmas. I know that sounds like I was being calculating, and maybe I was, but more than that, I was still processing. I was still waking up in the middle of the night running the numbers again because some part of me kept hoping I'd made an arithmetic error. I hadn't. My brother texted me twice in November. Once to say he was sorry for being hard to reach. Things had been hectic. Once to ask if I was coming home for the holidays. I responded to both texts with one-word answers and did not call him. My parents didn't know the full picture yet. My mom knew there had been a problem with the mortgage and that I'd fixed it. She didn't know how or why the problem existed. I asked her to trust me until after Christmas, and she agreed. Probably because she could hear in my voice that what I knew was going to hurt her, and she wasn't ready to hear it either. Christmas dinner. My parents' dining room, the table with the leaf inserted so it could fit 12 people. My dad at the head, still in the sweater my mom gave him the year before, glasses sliding down his nose. My brother sitting 2 seats down from him, wife beside him, contributing to the conversation like a man without a thing to worry about. And me, across the table with my phone in my pocket and a glass of wine. I wasn't really drinking. About an hour into dinner, my dad started talking about how grateful he was. He got a little sentimental, the way he sometimes does after a second glass of wine. He started talking about the hard year, how scary the mortgage situation had been, how he was so glad the family had pulled together. And then he looked at my brother and he said it. I don't know what we would have done without you. You really stepped up when things got hard. You've been carrying this family. My brother smiled. He looked at his plate modestly, like he was trying not to accept the credit. His wife rubbed his arm. I watched this happen. I put down my fork. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened the document I had saved 3 weeks earlier. The full accounting, the transfer records, the mortgage payment history, the gap laid out line by line. I set the phone face up on the table, and I slid it across to my dad. He looked at it without understanding for a moment. I said, I'm glad we are talking about this, because I have a question. I looked at my brother. If you've been the one carrying this family, then who sent $61,000? The table went completely quiet. My dad picked up the phone and looked at the document more carefully. I watched his face change as he started to understand what he was reading. It took about 30 seconds. Then he set the phone down and looked at my brother and didn't say anything. My brother started with, "That's not the full picture." He said the numbers needed context. He said there had been some months where he'd covered expenses himself that I didn't know about. His wife was nodding beside him, but she wasn't looking at anyone directly. I had anticipated this. I said, "Okay, then walk me through it." The document shows 36 transfers from my account. It shows the mortgage payment history. It shows the discrepancy. If you covered expenses that aren't reflected here, show me what they were. He couldn't. My mum had started crying quietly at her end of the table. My dad had gone very still in a way I'd rarely seen, not angry exactly, but the kind of still that happens when someone is reconfiguring something fundamental in how they understand their own life. My aunt asked if she should take the kids to the other room. Someone did take the kids to the other room. My brother tried a few more times. He said I was making him look like a villain. He said the situation was more complicated than a spreadsheet. He said I should have come to him privately instead of doing this at Christmas dinner. That last one almost made me laugh, because I had spent 6 weeks trying to get him on the phone, and he had spent 6 weeks avoiding me. And somehow, the problem was that I'd chosen an inconvenient moment. I said, "I've been trying to reach you since October. You have my number." Then I said the part that mattered most to me. The thing I'd been carrying since I sat in that parking lot reading the default notice. Mom and Dad almost lost their house. They were 4 months behind when I found out. I paid the arrears. I've been the one sending money every month for 3 years, and until 10 minutes ago, Dad thought it was you. My dad didn't look at my brother for the rest of the night. In the weeks after Christmas, things moved in the way these things do. Slowly and painfully and not cleanly. My parents had some difficult conversations with my brother that I was not part of. My dad called me one evening and said almost nothing for a long time before he finally said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." I told him he had nothing to apologize for. He said he was going to make it right. I told him the money wasn't the point anymore, which was mostly true. My brother and his wife eventually agreed, after a series of conversations I won't detail here, to repay $30,000 over a structured period. It wasn't the full amount. I'm not sure I'll ever see all of it. But the agreement is documented and signed and witnessed, and my parents know every detail of it, and my brother can no longer pretend it didn't happen. My mom went through a period of guilt that I think was harder to witness than the anger. She kept saying she should have checked. She should have known. I kept telling her she trusted her son, and that trust was not the problem. The breach of it was. She's getting there. My dad sold some things, picked up more consulting hours, and 4 months after Christmas, he handed me an envelope with $4,000 in it and said it was the first payment toward what he still considered a debt, even though I had never once called it that. I didn't argue with him. I took the envelope because refusing it would have taken something from him he needed to give. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled the dinner, if I should have confronted my brother privately, handled it more quietly, been more merciful. Here's the thing. I tried quiet. I spent 3 years being quiet. I sent money every month and never made it a topic and never asked for recognition and stayed in my lane. Quiet is how 3 years passed and $61,000 disappeared, and my parents nearly lost the house they'd lived in for 16 years. I don't think I owed my brother a private conversation. I think the dinner table was exactly where the truth needed to land because that was where the lie had lived. My dad raised his glass that night to the wrong person, but by the time dinner was over, he knew exactly who had been at the table all along. I keep thinking about that envelope my dad handed me 4 months after Christmas. $4,000 cash in a plain white envelope. He didn't make a speech about it. He just held it out and said it was a start. I took it because I understood what it cost him. Not financially, but in every other way that matters. That envelope was him saying, "I see you now. I should have seen you sooner." That's the part that stays with me. Not the money. Not even my brother's face when he couldn't answer my question. It's the way my dad looked when he put the phone down and went quiet. Like something he believed about his own family had just been rewritten, and he had to sit with the fact that he'd been reading the wrong version for 3 years. I've thought a lot about what allowed all of this to happen, not just what my brother did. That part is simple, even if it's painful. He made a choice, repeatedly, over 36 months, to take something that wasn't his. That's not complicated. What's more complicated is what I did or didn't do. I sent money every month and never verified where it landed because I confused trust with oversight. Those are not the same thing. Trust is what you extend to someone based on who you believe them to be. Oversight is what protects everyone, including the person you trust, from the slow drift of unchecked decisions. I knew how to do oversight professionally. I just didn't apply it at home, and that gap between what I knew and what I did cost my parents nearly losing a house they'd lived in for 16 years. I'm not saying I was wrong to help. I'd do it again, but I'd do it differently, with visibility, with verification, with the same care I'd bring to any client file. The people we love don't get a pass on accountability. If anything, they deserve more of our attention, not less, because the consequences of getting it wrong land on all of us. What got me through the months after Christmas wasn't anger. Anger burned off pretty quickly once I understood the full picture. What kept me steady was something closer to clarity. The decision to stay honest about what had happened, to document it carefully, to act on what I knew rather than what I wished were true. That's a kind of discipline that doesn't come naturally when you're hurt. It takes something out of you to be methodical when you want to be furious. But I'd learned from years of audit work that the truth doesn't need you to perform it. It just needs you to show up with the receipts. My brother made choices that hurt people who loved him. My parents are rebuilding something, their finances, yes, but also the way they understand their own story. I'm rebuilding something too. I'm learning that being the quiet one, the one who handles things without asking for recognition, is not a virtue if it means no one ever knows what you've actually done. You don't have to make it loud, but you do have to make it real. The table was set wrong for 3 years. I just finally brought the right paperwork to dinner.